part 3, where we're going to go over the Karma controls to control our dynamic MIDI. So the first one available is the real-time controls on and off. It's, of course, dealing with our real-time controls and the Karma on and off switch. Right now it's on toggle. Let's just put it on continuous since that's the default, I think, even though these are all set to M. So when I click this, we'll see that this will change to 100. It was already at 100, so it didn't change. If I click it off, we're at 0, on, off, of course. If I changed it to toggle, then of course every other press is going to give us the opposing value. And then if I change it to momentary, it's going to behave exactly like continuous did, where it's on and off. Latch does work, whether this is on or off. This switch is still going to send out data saying that it's off and on. Next we have our slider 1, which is going to be our master module slider. So all the way to the left is going to be, well, we're on momentary right now. So all the way, when it hits 127, it's going to be at 100. When it hits 0, it's going to be at 0. We could have it on continuous, of course, to get all the values in between. And then if we have it on toggle, there it is, then it's going to be every other time that we hit 127. All the rest of the sliders are going to behave the same way. Our switches are going to behave just like the on-off and latch switch, except it's going to be mapped to these switches. If we put our bottom and top at like 64, just click this and hit 64. And then let me click this and also hit 64. Then our switch is not going to work with toggle. It's always going to be 0. If I put this on 63, then I believe toggle will work normally. Yes, it will. And continuous, well, let me go to momentary. Momentary and continuous should behave exactly the same way. Yep, cool. Of course, since it's a switch, it's always passing right through bottom and top, so you can't get any intermediary steps, even though it is on continuous. So next we have our scenes. The scene switches are pretty cool. This is scene 1, so when I click on scene 1, we're outputting the top value. And then when I click on anything else, it goes back down to 0. Again, it's only when it's on scene 1, it'll be at the top value. Remember, we can always scale the values. Well, yeah, we can always scale the values, the minimum and max values here. But otherwise, since this would only be setting the affected range and a switch is always going from 0 to 127, these pretty much have no They have no control. I mean, other than if you set them to the same value. Hopefully that isn't too confusing. Let's see. Let's go to, well, let's actually stay on scene 1, and let me show you toggle. So toggle works how you would think. It's every other time you hit the scene, will output the opposite value. It'll, I guess you could say, oscillate, or it'll, what do I want to say, seesaw. It'll change between going from the bottom and top value every other switch. So now we're on scene any is actually worth talking about. So that means any scene has the same function. So basically, momentary won't do anything. It'll always be outputting the max value since we're switching to a new scene and then getting the output of max value from that scene. Same thing with continuous. We're always going to be outputting a max value, but if we switch to toggle, then every other scene we pick will switch from the minimum and maximum value. So that's really, really cool. Do some crazy stuff. Chord triggers. When we click a chord trigger, we'll output, right now it's on toggle, so every other press will go from bottom to top. If we put it on momentary, goes to top and then resets to 0, saying that this is a true momentary switch. This is actually the only true momentary switch that we've gone over so far. Unless we might be able to program these to behave as if they're momentary. Let me see. If I go to real-time parameters, and let's say that I change this to... No, I don't see a way to program this to turn it into a momentary switch. Oh well. So yeah, we're still in dynamic MIDI 1, and we're using our chord triggers. So this, we get true momentary action. Continuous behaves just like momentary, since we're only outputting 127 when it's on, and then 0 when it's off. There is another thing though. If we go to edit, these function keys, because these do behave off of function keys, will output a velocity of 127. So the velocity of the pads actually matters. And if I put the velocity down, then I'm not outputting the max value anymore. And that should probably only be when I'm on continuous. Let's see if we hit it on momentary. So momentary doesn't seem to be doing anything anymore, which is probably a glitch. Let's put it back on toggle. Oh, I guess because I have to hit 127 or momentary won't work. Toggle probably won't work either. Yeah. But continuous should. Because when it's on momentary and toggle, it has to hit the top parameter in order to change. I could put it on momentary again and then just put this below whatever I assigned this at, 80. Actually, 80 will work. And then momentary will output max and then go back down to 0. Toggle should behave exactly the same, except it just clicks every other one. Last, we have chord trigger any, which obviously just means that all the chord triggers will trigger our dynamic MIDI. Toggle means that every other one, whoops, as long as I set the function key to 127, means that every other one will output a different value. The same one will also toggle between the values. Momentary is, of course, going to behave as a momentary switch. In this case, continuous will behave the same way, except it can also be changed with velocity for every single pad. Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't assign different velocities to these. These velocities won't work. I'm not sure if you had like an external control source like a nano pad, if that would work, where each pad could send a different velocity, and then you could use like chord trigger pad any, but then have those chord trigger pads have different velocities. Yeah, I'm not sure if that would work. Maybe it would, but I don't have the proper setup to really test it. And that's it for this one. Next time, we're going to go over a completely different set of sources. So thanks.